There was a woman who woke up one morning on Valentine's Day and said to her husband, "I dreamt that you bought me a diamond bracelet. What do you think that means?" And he said, "Well, you'll know tonight." So when he gets home, he's coming home from work, and he has this gift, and she's so delighted. And she opened it up, and here it was, a book, "What's the Meaning of Dreams?" Oh, tricky. So you might think that they might be having a dream up there on that mountaintop today, but I like to look at it as a spiritual retreat. Peter, James, and John working so hard and being invited by Jesus to come up on the mountaintop to pray. That to me was a spiritual retreat. I remember a spiritual retreat that I took on a mountain, and it was called the Mount Summit Challenge. And the Mount Summit Challenge was in Uniontown, PA, and it was this mountain that was about almost 3,000 feet high, and it ran from the bottom where we would run. It was a 3.1 mile run, and it was very grueling. And I would run it with a group of other women. We'd meet at the base and run up the mountainside. I wanted to show you. Oh, I want to show you. Still getting used to that. This is just a couple photos. I wanted to kind of give you an idea. And then there's another one. Those are the best photos I could find, but you can see how steep the mountains are. Do you know, athletes have this wonderful sense of spirituality. I don't know if you realize it. I think more people would be more inclined to be athletic if they knew. There's this wonderful thing that happens when you have this opportunity to have let's say, a rhythm of grace and beauty. I can say that. So whatever you do is walk or run or canoe or row, whatever you do. When you're doing it, something happens to you where it's like the created and the creator are one, and you become in communion with God. And so on that mountaintop, it's just you and yourself and God. When you're climbing that mountain and you're persevering and it's tough and your head is down and you're moving and occasionally you put your head up and nope, the summit isn't there yet, and you're climbing and climbing, and well, I'm not going to tell you my times because that's really unimportant. But that's not just the whole thing of it, the whole race. It wasn't just the spirituality of the running and just the calling out of yourself in the very deepest place. When you got to the mountaintop, there was this magnificent vista. And you'd look over and you could see 10 counties on a clear day. And you'd look out over the mountain and you'd look out over the valleys and all those counties and you'd say, "It is good. It is good." And I have another picture that's another photograph of when you come up to the top of the mountain. And then you're up there and you want to linger there, but there's something even better at this place. About 3 miles down the road was a United Methodist camp. And on top, and it was right on the summit as well, and at this camp it was called Jamonville, and there was this giant 60-foot cross. And you would enter the camp and you'd have to park down below and walk up to this cross. And there it is there. And you could see it for 50 miles. All around. It was beautiful. I don't know if anyone's ever seen it. It weighs 55 tons, and it can withstand 100 miles per hour winds. It was erected in 1950. And you have another vista from that mountaintop, too. I'm sure I think that's almost looking like the same one. It's on the other side of the mountain. That you're looking at is Uniontown. And so you see a city in that vista, and the other vista you see all rural. This spiritual retreat that I was on, this spiritual retreat that I was experiencing, I wanted to linger there. Well, nobody wants to go home, because there's something really grand going on, something really great going on when you realize and you look out and you see the greatness of God. I think that's what happened with the disciples. They climb this mountain, and they're here with Jesus, and all of a sudden Jesus is glorified, and Moses is there, and Elijah, and it's just all too much to take in. Peter is in his impulsive way. He doesn't know what to say. He has this sense of worship. Let's stay here all day. Let's stay here forever. Let's set up shop here because this is grand. There's something really profound about this. He can't help himself. We want to linger in these spiritual places. I get that. There's a road, State Route 119, that goes from Pittsburgh, and it goes down through Union downtown through West Virginia. And when you take this road, you can see this cross up on the hill, and I can go from there to my daughter's in West Virginia, and every time I go by, I linger in that memory of how wonderful those days were when we used to climb that mountain and go to that cross. And it brought this wonderful, again, sense of God. We all have that. We need that. This is good, we say, when we have those places where God's goodness is shining. A sense of life in God and how good it is. So some of you, I don't pretend to know where you've experienced that. I'm just sharing mine. I can't begin to know unless you tell me. But I can think Camp Mac, that's an easy one. Or in your own ministries, or at a family gathering. How about some of the gardens, Fernwood Gardens or Welfare Gardens? How about just baking or painting or in your prayer time or sewing and the things that you're doing, and it's just you and God together, and sometimes this divine glory happens. We don't always expect it, but it just shows up. I just was talking to a woman that just came back from Hawaii, and she said something so wonderful. They flew into Honolulu, and then they took this cruise around the islands. And she said the one island where they got off, and I can't remember which one it was, she said, we got off, and she said we were standing on the shore, and it was this rocky shoreline, and the water was hitting up against the shore. And she said, all of a sudden, she said, it was like this divine place. And she said, I didn't want to leave there. I didn't want to leave there. She said it was sacred. We know that there's a sacred place everywhere. Sometimes the divine presence is powerful. We know Jesus' Spirit walks with us, resides in us, but sometimes the presence is more powerful. It doesn't have to always be in a physical place. It can be just in a place in your heart where somebody that you've been praying for such a long time turns around and comes home. And we're going to be talking about the homecoming, the prodigal son. It could be that moment that would be so divine and so sacred. Family member. And you see this greatness of God, this mystery that we can't explain. I'm sure they couldn't tell anybody what happened on the mountain. No one would probably believe it. This intimate place of mystery and relationship with God. That's a powerful thing. And in those places, sometimes God speaks to us in words of wisdom and encouragement, some truth that we can take with us until the next time. And that's what happens today. God says, this is my son, my chosen. Listen to him. Shut up and listen. I read that somewhere in the commentary. I was thinking, no, that's kind of rude. That's kind of rude. God wouldn't say that. Because Peter was just being Peter. Because he couldn't help it. There was something really pretty fabulous going on. He says, pay attention to him. Live and learn from him. He's my son. I'm proclaiming this. This is the whole idea. You can't stay here. Don't linger too long, because there are other things that are going on. We love this moment. We want to stay in those spiritual moments forever. We want them all the time. My mother used to say, we are so heavenly minded, we are no earthly good. Have you heard that one? We are so heavenly minded, we're no earthly good. We want those spiritual moments so bad we can't see anything else. Martin Luther King wrote that speech, I've been to the mountaintop. And you know, King doesn't linger there. He's there. He's been there. He understands. Listen what he says. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, he says, because I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land, and I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as people, will get to the promised land. King gives this speech the day before he dies, and he's there standing and advocating for the sanitation workers of Memphis. They're underpaid and overworked. Their benefits are terrible, and he's standing for them. He was fighting for the need for fair press when all the press was doing was showing what the strike was doing to the city, but not what the city was doing to the strikers. It was upside down. He was standing and advocating for justice. See, he'd been to the mountaintop, but his vista was good, and he saw the suffering together. He saw the promise of God and the equality that God had called us to. And he saw how they suffered. He couldn't stay in that place. He couldn't linger there. He couldn't, because God was calling him to a greater place, something so profound and so great that he didn't even realize. All he knew, he was answering. He was seeing something that God wanted him to do. The vista of his heart he was seeing on that mountaintop. And he asked this question. When he referenced the Good Samaritan, he says, the question is not, if I stop to help this man in need, what will happen to me? The question is, if I do not stop to help the sanitation workers, what will happen to them? He has this wonderful glory of God, but he sees the suffering together. That's a powerful combination. And he moves. He's on that mountaintop, and he says, what will happen to them if I don't do something? And I think about Jesus' ministry. And this is a pivotal place for Jesus, because his vista, when he's on that mountaintop, he sees the cross. He sees the cross. If not me, then who? And the disciples don't know. They are just experiencing this beauty of Christ glorified. And we need those spiritual challenges, those spiritual retreats, because our life is so challenging. Even Jesus needed the spiritual retreats. Even Jesus needed to go to the mountain. It wasn't about just them. Jesus was facing the cross. His vista was the cross. And now we are in this pivotal place in our church season where we want to linger in that epiphany that we just experienced. This is my son, God says. Don't listen to him. Listen to him. If it isn't us, then who? King says. If we're not the ones advocating for children or for seniors or advocating for children that are being stolen in human trafficking, if it isn't us, who then? If we're not the ones encouraging, if we're not the ones coming down off the mountaintop and stepping in, who then? King asked. That's what we are asking ourselves. If it's not us, who's it going to be? We have these wonderful spiritual moments, and we want to take them and use them. If we're not advocating for homeless, for housing, if we're not feeding people, if we're not caring for those that aren't cared for, who then? We're closing the Epiphany, and we're walking right in the midst here with God into Lent. The journey with Christ, we're journeying in those scripture passages with Christ as he leaves the mountain and he faces the cross. And we'll find in those places love and forgiveness and grace. God's kingdom realized in this world. That's who we are. And if we linger too much, we linger in those beautiful spiritual moments, we'll miss it. We'll miss the opportunity to show others the path of salvation in their souls. Thank you.